What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here. Welcome to day 138 of the 365-day graphic novel review challenge. Today, I want to talk to you about Essential Hulk, Volume 1. This is the first few years of the Hulk comics, the first 6 issues of Hulk, and then Tales to Astonish issues 60 through 91. And that sounds like a whole lot of comics, but with Tales to Astonish, what they would do is half of the issue would have the Hulk, and then the other half would have, at first, Giant Man and the Wasp, and then later they were replaced by Namor the Submariner. And so it's actually only half of those issues of Tales to Astonish collected here. And this is really good. I wasn't really sure what to expect when I went into this book, because when you read Marvel books from the 60s, it could go one of two ways. It could be really good, like Fantastic Four or the Avengers, or it could be really bad, like Daredevil or X-Men. And this, I think, falls a lot closer to the Avengers Fantastic Four spectrum than it does the Daredevil X-Men side of things. In fact, this reminds me a lot of Essential Captain America Volume 1, which was another series which was collecting half of each issue of Tales of Suspense. And so, much like the Captain America book, this does not have a whole lot of time to dilly-daddle with 22 pages of comic. Most of these stories here are only 10 pages long. All of the Tales to Astonish issues here are only 10 pages long. So, a lot like that Captain America book, where it just jumps right into the action and gets to the heat of things, and then it ends pretty quickly, it does the same thing here, where Hulk will be fighting some bad guy, and then he'll go right into fighting another bad guy, and then it'll end on a big cliffhanger, and then the next issue will pick right up where it ended. It reminds me a lot of soap operas, which I don't watch soap operas or anything, but I'm familiar with how they work, and with most soap operas, they will have some storyline going, and then they will stop the episode before that storyline is actually concluded or finished for that episode. Most other TV shows will resolve things at the end of an episode, but soap operas don't usually do that. For example, somebody will pull out a gun, and then they will shoot somebody, but you don't know who they shot, and then you have to watch the next episode to figure out, okay, who did he shoot? That's going on a lot with this Hulk book here. This really feels like Stan Lee and all his artistic collaborators on this book are really trying to create a soap opera in superhero comic book form. You've got all sorts of weird soap operatic stuff going on. Betty Ross, she's in love with Bruce, and then you've got Glenn Talbot, he's introduced, and he's in love with Betty, but he's not necessarily a bad guy, although he skirts that line a little bit here and there, where he kind of has some bad thoughts about, well, if I did this, then I could have Betty all to myself. And then you've got General Ross, who starts off being just an unlikable windbag, but then throughout the book, he actually becomes more likable, to me anyway, and I know later writers, they handle him much less likable than he's handled in the later half of this book. But I think that he starts to become more likable throughout this book, whereas I don't think he's as likable in the later decades. But you've also got other Hulk characters introduced, like the Leader. He shows up for a little bit and then is seemingly dealt with, but of course we know he will come back later. And then you've got the Abomination, who's introduced at the very end of this book. You've got a lot of kind of famous Hulk stuff being introduced fairly early on here. But it really does feel like a soap opera, because with only 10 pages per issue to get everything done, they don't waste any time on the fluff stuff like they would if they had 20 or 22 pages to tell a story. So it feels very quick-paced, it feels very fast, it hits you where it needs to hit you, and then it moves on and it hits you again. One thing that I really like about this book, it reminds me of a video that I did a few years ago where I talked about how the Hulk does not have a consistent status quo. And what I was observing was that, at least nowadays, every time a new creative team comes on the Hulk, they change everything about what's going on, and they do their own thing. For example, Jason Aaron, he was doing this thing where Bruce Banner was kind of the enemy of the series, and Hulk was the protagonist. And then he was followed up by Mark Waid, who completely ignored all of that, and he had the Hulk as an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. So that's kind of been a thing for a really long time. What I did not realize when I made that video was that that's been going on since the very beginning. Pretty much as soon as Hulk goes into Tales to Astonish, this abandons any attempt at keeping a consistent status quo, and Stan Lee and whoever the artist that he's working on with that issue, they will just do whatever they want to do. At one point, fairly early on in the series, much earlier than what I thought it was going to happen, everyone on the planet finds out that the Hulk is Bruce Banner. I thought that was going to be something that everyone would find out like 10 years later, in like the mid-70s. No, it happens very early on. You've got lots of stuff where they are very clearly not trying to have a consistent, okay, this is the status quo, this is what Hulk will be doing in this series from now on. No, Hulk may be on the army base, or he may be on the other side of the world. They don't really have a consistent thing for him to be doing. It's kind of fluid in what it has this series to be about. And I think that's good. It makes this more interesting and exciting to read, but at the same time, I think that's why these days no one really has a clear handle on how the Hulk series should be written. Pretty much everyone who writes the Hulk differently, the series and the character, and I think it all goes back to how this is trying to be a soap opera, and so they're trying to keep things interesting and shake things up every single issue, and in doing so, they kind of left the Hulk without a consistent status quo going as far back as the 60s, and that kind of had ramifications for the series on up until today. Now, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing for this book. Like I said, that makes this book very exciting to read, a lot like that Essential Captain America book that I talked about a few months ago. But I really enjoyed this book. If you are interested in the Hulk and you don't know where you should begin, I would suggest that you check out some of the early 60s stuff. Now, you may not like the Essential Hulk Volume 1 because it is in black and white. Personally, that doesn't bother me. I know it bothers a lot of people, but Marvel has recently been doing these epic collections where they are collecting every single appearance of a character, and they have it all planned out by year. They have done an epic collection for the first couple years of the Hulk, so if this sounds interesting to you, then I would check that out. See what it's about, and then if you like it, be sure to come back here and tell me that you liked it. And if you like this video, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I will be back tomorrow with a different video. In the meantime, you guys have a great rest of the day. Catch you later.